let you know when we're good to go.
I actually stayed in town, Dan, because they offered a Zoom meeting at the last minute. And so I said, why spend all that money driving to Boise?
Okay, we are good to go.
More than 5 hours. Geez.
Good
Yeah, I just
evening,
stayed in
everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of Blaine County School District Board of Trustees. It is May 11th, 2021 at 6 p.m. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Trustee Larna.
Present.
Trustee Turner.
Present.
Trustee Gorham.
Present.
Trustee Stone.
Given that 4 trustees are present, a quorum exists, and I will call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Were there any trustees unable to review the agenda? Are there any proposed changes to the agenda? I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written.
I will make a motion to approve the agenda as written.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as written. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the agenda as written?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes with the ayes, and it's a unanimous vote. The agenda is approved. The first item on the consent agenda is the consideration of minutes. Have all the trustees had the opportunity to review the minutes that are posted on the agenda? Are there any questions about the minutes?
Nope.
Okay, no changes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Chair votes with the ayes, and it's a unanimous vote. The minutes have been approved. The next item on the consent agenda is the consideration of monthly financial reports and the payment of bills. Has everyone had an opportunity to review those documents?
Yeah.
And are there any questions? Dan, Trustee Turner.
On the report entitled Revenue Expense Budget Tracking, it looks as though through the reporting period we are still operating with a positive about $1 million to budget. I was wondering if we could comment on if we anticipate this surplus to hold through the end of the term.
Cheryl?
There it goes. We're trying to project out the fund balance, looking at the rest of the year. We'll always have kind of a boost in June where the transfers into the other funds were made. I'll probably have a better feel for that next month, or even later this month as we look at, because we have stopped all spending in the schools, but we still have stuff coming in. So it's looking strong. So I think we should be okay. But
could you highlight any particular variances to the expense line? That seems to be where we're getting most of the traction.
I'm trying to get a better understanding of the budget as a whole and understanding where maybe considerations were made that I'm afraid I really can't answer in detail or accurately yet. But as we work through it every day, we're seeing items there. And so I'm afraid I really can't do that yet. I think I'll have a much better feel for it in the next few weeks because we're delving into more detail. But
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Are there any further questions or any further discussion? I'll entertain a motion to approve the monthly financial reports.
I move we approve the monthly finance reports.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the monthly financial reports. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? The chair votes with the ayes, and it's another unanimous vote. The monthly financial reports have been approved. The third item on the consent agenda is the consideration of personnel exiting, entering, and alternate authorizations. Superintendent Peters, do you want to talk, or Brooke, actually, do you want to talk to that? Walk us through that?
Sorry, trying to get that unmute. Good evening, trustees. Yes, we have quite a few new hires with regard to certified staff. It's been a busy season for hiring. In addition, also wanted to give a shout out and thank you to John Pierce at Wood River High School as he goes on to a new position. And I'm not sure he has shared that widely, so I'll leave the details to conversations with Mr. Pierce. But we wish him well and thank him for all his years of service here. In addition, Tony Bausch is not leaving our district. She has actually been hired as the next Silver Creek High School principal as Mike Glenn is retiring and off to more fly fishing, I think, in his future. So we're really excited about that. And I know that Tony is extremely excited about this opportunity. In addition, I wanted to also recognize that even though this was a little bit ago, it feels like eons ago that we actually went through the process for the Wood River Middle School High School or Wood River Middle School principal. A congratulations to Mr. Rob Ditch for his hiring in that position. In addition, also Ms. Donna Pearson has been selected as the
Brooke, you're frozen up and we can't hear you.
So Donna was accepted as the assistant principal at Wood River Middle School, so she'll be the vice principal there. And we'll see if Brooke can reboot and get back on. We do have some certified staff that are exiting. That's Alicia Hollis.
be looking for.
There she is. And there she goes. I think she's rebooting.
Okay, there we go. Brooke,
Are
are
you
you back
back,
with us again?
Yeah,
Are
I'm
you
not
back,
sure
Brooke?
what happened there.
You just froze. You just froze
Yeah.
for a minute.
Okay, all right. And then we have a number of classified staff exiting the district. And in addition, I want to particularly wish McKenna Murphy well. She will sadly be leaving to move to another part of Idaho, and we wish her well and success in her new ventures, but we will definitely miss her. So any questions from the board or?
Dan, Trustee Turner?
I noticed when the classified staff leave, they have different exit dates. Why is that? We're looking at some are on 5/17, others are at 8/31. Are they on different sort of kind of contract periods, or why does that work that way?
Nope. Actually, in the instances of the two custodians, they are not on different time schedules with regard to the other, or calendars with regard to the other classified. Those individuals just resigned in the, towards the end of the year. Normally, that would be a different date. It would normally be the August 31st
Okay.
date. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consideration of personnel exiting, entering, and alternate authorizations.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consideration of personnel. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It is again a unanimous vote. The consideration of personnel has been approved. Thank you, Brooke. Now we're on to the action agenda. The first item on the action agenda is the approval of Elementary Data Day Friday. Superintendent Peters, can you talk us through that?
You bet, Trustee Stone. Basically here, the elementary principals have all presented a short memo or letter to you. They all signed off on it. And basically they're requesting that the elementary schools have the 28th, Friday, May 28th off as a day-to-day. So we would have to communicate that very clearly to all parents. As the secondary schools were able to continue in a 4-day week, they have the ability on as they enter near the end of the year to do the work of what we traditionally do in day-to-day. So the key components of their request is as follows. Because the school year shifted this year, those 2 weeks, normally our day-to-day was taken out. And there's 2 day-to-days normally in a school year. One at the very beginning, so the teachers can spend time researching and getting to know their new students and updating their plans, their milepost plans, their ELP plans for English language plans, their 504 plans, their IEP plans for special education, and basically just getting to know the history of the students in terms of their test scores and basically their transcripts. So we do that in the fall, but then in the spring, we've had one to close out the year. And some of the key things they do there is they close a lot of those plans that they either open up or they look at in the fall. So the key thing they have to do is they have to go into every single individual student's plan, and they have to write what's called a summary or a finalization of that plan if they're closing the plan, or they have to update that plan. And that takes quite a bit of time. And then they also get ready to look at their ISAT scores. They look at their final exams, they prep, and it's a big, big day for the teachers. The secondary teachers will have that available to them, and the elementary teachers would not because of the decision to move the elementaries back to a 5 days. So they're asking for a normal day that they would get their day-to-day on Friday, May 28th, in order to complete the required work prior to teachers going off contract. So without this day, teachers would have to complete all this work in that one day when they have normal checkout duties, which is another huge set of duties. They have to meet with their individual principal to check out formally, and they have to make sure their rooms are prepped for the custodians, etc. So the principals banded together at the behest of many of their staff to request this day as a day with no school, where the teachers could focus on a spring day-to-day to close out the year academically and through many of their plans.
Are there any questions for Superintendent Peters?
I don't have any questions. I think it's probably a great day to have it anyway, with Memorial Day being Monday and a lot of students being out of school anyway.
Trustee
Sorry,
Turner?
Dan.
Oh, no. So June 14th is the day on the calendar, right? That's the wrap-up day. And so this is in addition to that day. And so in a normal calendar year, this day-to-day would be somewhere in May or something, or is this okay? And so we would lose the one instruction day, I take it.
Correct.
And just so we could let our parents know, I know since the kind of the natural trajectory of curriculum kind of points towards those Icesat tests, and now that we've got a couple weeks after these Icesat tests that we didn't have before, what should we be prepping our parents to be thinking about as far as content delivery in these last couple weeks? I know it'll be kind of the pacing, everything's kind of off. What would we expect to the work that'll be done in these last couple weeks?
Well, our curriculum doesn't really point to the Icesat tests. The Icesat tests are basically, if we are teaching the approved standards and we are focusing on the Common Core standards, then the Icesat tests should really take care of themselves. What we can do during the course of the year, Trustee Turner, is look at what are called interim assessment blocks, IABs. And those are like taking a mini section of the Icesat test that a teacher can focus on and see how the kids are doing. So they're kind of like a formative assessment along the way to see if the kids are gaining the skills and knowledge and abilities to get ready for the Icesat tests, or if there's some primary focus points that you really want to help the kids with. So teachers in the fall can look at their kids' ISAT scores from the previous year. Now, we couldn't do this year because ISATs were canceled the spring prior. But what they would normally do is look at the test scores in the fall, and then they could see which areas of deficit the students had individually, and then they could collectively pick which IABs or interim assessment blocks that they might want to take along the course of the year. But there's a whole nother pattern of academic work that is being done, and that is preparation for AP exams, preparation for final exams, and covering the base and core curriculum that class has. And that core and base curriculum goes well beyond the ISATs, all the way to the last day of school. So many parents, and I'm talking to the parents here and the students, many parents think, oh, my AP exam is done, I'm done. My ISAT tests are done, I'm done. And that's really a bad message to send to the students and the parents, because the final exams are often much more accountable to the student's grade than any possibility of some standardized tests through the state of Idaho. So the big final exams that the kids have to take for credit, especially in secondary, and the big projects that are due in elementary are all winding up all the way down to that last couple of days of school near June 10th and 11th. So that's really a critical aspect of the students' work these last few weeks. And some parents get in their mind, oh, the ISATs are done, or the AP test is done, I don't have to be at school. And kids have actually lost credit because they kind of wound it down about, a month too early. So we still have a solid month of school left all the way till June 10th and even June 11th. And teachers will be grading and doing their final makeups and stuff as late as June 11th, and even, right up to that very last hour. Some of the kids can even get close to graduation in those last few hours right before graduation.
Mm-hmm.
Trustee Turner?
Yeah, I certainly appreciate the clarity on that. I guess it's just in the trade-off of losing an instructional day versus the necessity to compile the data. And it sounds like the principals are pretty united in what they believe the value of that extra day-to-day would be. So appreciate all the background there. Thank you.
Trustee Gorham, did you have a question earlier?
Well, no, it was pretty much answered. I was just going to say that, obviously it's very compelling to get a united front from all the principals with an ask. And was there really anything that was, a red flag that would be against this that I don't see? Because I certainly don't see that at this point. It was answered. So thank you.
Are there any further questions for Superintendent Peters? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the elementary data day so that the board can discuss it.
I second that. Or do I need to make the motion?
Say so moved.
I so moved. Let's do this.
I'll second that.
Okay, great. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, then all those in favor of the motion to approve the elementary data day, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes. The next item on the action agenda is the trustee rezone agreement. Superintendent Peters, do you want to explain that to us?
Yeah, Vicky's been working on this, our board clerk, as well as some other folks. And this is something that's happening across the state of Idaho every 10 years with the work by the federal government to take our census. We have to look at rezoning our trustee zones. And so in the state of Idaho, they're also looking at changing all the potential zones depending on the growth of population in various representative districts and senatorial districts, et cetera, throughout the state. And this is a national thing for federal elections as well. So what we do here is, this is really highly recommended, is we work with the Quadrant Consulting, and what they do is they do this work for us, and we supply them, and the ISBA, the Idaho State School Board Association, works very closely in making sure we have the tools and the group that will work with us to prepare for a possible rezoning if we need to, based on our population trends with the census. The problem with this right now is that the census data is very late this year, as everyone might have read in the papers. The data kept being pushed back and the reports kept being pushed back, but we're right on par with the rest of the state of Idaho, and most districts are doing this. I've consulted with some other superintendents and they are signing on with Quadrant as well, and it's a pretty standard procedure every decade or so. So we can see that if we have to shift our boundaries at all to make sure that we have fair and even boundaries that are based along Idaho code, and then the contract is signed with ISBA by June 1, and the cost for services will be in phase 1 and phase 2. It's a lump sum of about $6,500. And then when the data is received, the cost for services would go up further if we don't sign on now. So it's a very good deal. The cost is not too excessive for this type of work, and it's something that we have to do as per Idaho code.
Are there any questions for Superintendent Peters? Trustee Turner?
Yeah, it looks like the contract has a phase 1 and phase 2. And so phase 1, if our numbers don't have a variance of over 10%, then we're good. We don't have to do anything. And so we just pay the phase 1. But if we do have that movement of over 10%, that kicks in the phase 2. So there is a chance we would only pay the $1,900 for phase 1 if we don't have those kind of population movements.
Correct.
It looks, we have some crazy looking districts, but I guess they were drawn that way for a reason at some point. So let's stick with them.
That was actually one thing I thought of. I was pleased that the first item says school district zones should not create bizarrely shaped zones without adequate explanation attached to the submittal. And I wonder, do you know, Superintendent Peters, do they try to clean them up when they are written in such unusual shapes and neighborhoods, or do they mostly try not to change them if it's not necessary?
Well, our problem with ours is geographical. If you look at the geography of our county, especially in the Wood River Valley, we are so cylindrical. Basically, we're just this long. We're not very wide, but we're really up and down, north and south. So we have to reach out and grab certain neighborhoods to be able to get that number. So we do have some bizarrely shaped. If we were more of a flatland type approach, you could probably see very equal quadrants. But even in those ones, you'd see sometimes a quadrant that's a tenth of the size of another quadrant based on population density. So the density of the population is really important, and that's why our areas have to reach out further and grab like a little small group down here, and then you'll see an arm to some of our zones. You'll see this funky little arm that goes way down to grab a zone where there's a little bit more population base to keep that number a little bit equitous.
Okay, are there any further questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve the trustee rezone agreement.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the trustee rezone agreement. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve it, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. And we're on to the item C on the action agenda, which is about appointing a new treasurer now that Brian Fletcher has left and Cheryl is on board. Trustee Peters, or Superintendent Peters, could you please talk about that?
Yeah, this is really a formality with the transfer of position. Now that our wonderful Cheryl Sanderson is on board, we simply need to change over the actual title and the appointment officially by the board. And then we also need to change over the actual signatories for the various accounts and asset accounts for the district. So it's a simple thing that Chairman Rourke would need to sign and the board clerk, and then date it. And it would just simply transfer over, but it does need to be a vote of the board, where normally this would be an annual thing that we would do at our annual meeting in July. This is just something that we have to do because of the shift of personnel. So it's just a formality to appoint Cheryl to her designated duties.
Are there any questions? Okay, do I hear a motion to approve the resolution to appoint a treasurer?
Do we need to have Cheryl's name in there or no?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Do we need to have Cheryl's name in there?
Yeah, let's put Cheryl's name in there. Do I hear a motion to approve appointing Cheryl Sanderson as the treasurer for
So
the
moved.
Public School District?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion, the ayes have it and the motion carries. Item D on the action agenda has two different items on there. One is about the budget for nursing, and the other one is the data coordination hours. Can we start with the nursing, Superintendent Peters?
Yes, this is a request from the district to keep our staffing with our nurses. We only actually have 2.0 FTE in the general fund. And this year, in response to COVID, we increased that by 1.6. And many of the nurses are actually asking for a 4.0, as you are well aware, I believe. Some of you anyway. So the idea is that we would want to keep the minimum allowance of nurses that we have right now and just keep that going. We have found over the course of this year that, that the increased number of nurses that we have is just barely meeting our need. Many school districts in Idaho do have a nurse in every single school on a regular basis, much less for COVID. We have been short-staffed, in my opinion, for nurses for a very, very long period of time. And the district really, we feel that this is a very, very pertinent and important allowance for these FTE increases. And while the district is requesting that we keep the exact same amount of nurses that we have currently this year, the nurses themselves have asked for a total of a 4.0 to have 4 full-time nurses, not just 4 part-time nurses.
Are there any questions?
I just want to, if I may, understand. So right now we have 4 part-time nurses and they are asking for 4 full-time nurses.
That's what the nurses are asking for. Our official recommendation here was simply to, at a minimum, keep going with what we have this year. The nurses themselves have come forward and asked to put forth a request for a 4.0. They just feel that with not only the work they've done this year, but with the growth of school nursing and what's going on in our communities, we have so many students that are not getting the full-time care or regular care that they need. We have a lot of nurses doing education in many of our classes. They're managing a multitude of school plans. I would say that since the time that I was principal at Wood River Middle School back in the early 2000s to now, the increase in the number of student medical plans has been, I would say, close to tenfold. The amount of students that have life-threatening allergies, the amount of students that come to us needing to be ready to receive medication on a daily basis. With a part-time nurse that we had in prior years where the nurse was rarely there, our secretaries were doing nursing duties. And now the secretaries' jobs have increased so dramatically with so many more things to deal with than they had to deal with a few years ago, that having a nurse there has been an incredible lifesaver to our staff. The secretaries are also not trained, and it's not in their job descriptions to do a lot of the medical things they've had to do but they've been doing it for years. And this year, finally, the nurses were there to really give professional care to so many of our students who do not come to us with the normal medical treatment and services that they may get. So this is an outreach program just as much as it is a daily dose of things for our students. Not only do we provide, and one of the things that many of the teachers talk about is that when you have a nurse come into our classes for puberty and hygiene and STDs and healthy relationships and all kinds of things and CPR, our nurses actually command a little more respect sometimes than maybe the certified health teacher, where there's like having that special guest come in that has a medical training. The students tend to like perk up a little bit and really do a better job in terms of paying attention to those critical classes. So there's just quite a bit of work, and one of the things is that COVID has brought us is it's brought us the fact that our nurses, that we increased the number of them, and all of them were busy bank to bank Whitewater the whole year. So that's really where the request is coming from, that it's a basic need that many schools have every day. And for us to have a nurse in a school for a full day, almost a full day, for a whole full week is just really tremendous. And remember, most of our nurses still are shared between multiple schools, except the biggest schools.
Trustee Larna.
So one more question, just adding on to that. How are they, I guess, divvied up right now if there's only four full-time, and then or part-time, what would it look like is full-time?
If they became a full-time nurse, you would simply have more hours during the day. And so instead of working, let's say, 4 days a week or partial days each week, they'd be there full-time. But right now they're at some schools the whole day, like at Wood River High School, and then I believe the middle school. But then they share other schools. Most of the elementaries have a nurse that will go there, let's say AM, PM, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that kind of thing. So there's a rotation so that all the schools are getting much more nursing services. You know, literally our nursing services this year have increased dramatically over what we've had in the past. If you can imagine 2 nurses for the entire district with 8 schools and 3,000 kids and trying to do all this, it was really, it was kind of throwing sand into a windstorm. It was so tough for the 2 nurses that we had to get all the work they needed to do done. So it fell on other people and increased their workload. Having the 3.6 nurses this year and dealing with all the COVID things, we found out that having nurses in schools in general is so much more beneficial to our students and their health concerns.
Trustee Turner.
Yeah, I you know, we've been very focused on head count and things, but it seems to me 4 nurses is something where we could directly look at a return on investment here. I mean, this seems like such a critical role. I mean, fortunately we got a great piece from the National Association of School Nurses that talked about, you know, the roles of nurses in schools, and it's incredible to look at how many different bases they cover. But when it just comes down to the return on investment side, you know, as we go forward in a world where we're going to be receive funding through average daily attendance, keeping kids in class is a bottom line issue for us. And you know, this study says repeated studies identified the school nurses reduce absenteeism, and a higher nurse to student ratio is related to better attendance. School absentee affects performance and contributes to school dropouts and has economic and social repercussions. It says school nurses are significantly less likely to dismiss from school early a child rather than a non-licensed personnel. And it says in several communities, hiring nurses increases attendance, decreased dropout, and increased achievement. I mean, these are all goals that I think are lofty enough to justify adding an additional full-time nurse. So we have 4 full-time nurses to cover our schools.
Trustee Gorham.
Well, I was just going to ask like specifics of what's on the table. I think I'm leaning towards 4 nurses. It looks like the board's being asked for 3.6. So tonight, are we in a position to, how does that shake out?
I spoke with Erin earlier today to ask about that, and she said that while they were asking for 3.6 because of the budgetary constraints that we've been trying to, be careful about, not to misunderstand that there were, she could use every single FTE we sent her way.
Yeah, I think we're just trying to be conservative, and I think that's Erin's approach to this recommendation, is just being really conservative with all the other things we do. But yeah, I really agree with, remember that Idaho is going back on to the ADA next year. And one year when we really focused on improving our attendance, we gained about $600,000 in the district from the state, because our attendance went up from about 93 to 92% up to 95%. And just that 3% difference increased our revenue by almost 600,000. I think that was about 4 to 5 years ago. I think it was Superintendent Holmes' second or third year where she saw that we were not getting the most out of our attendance. And so we all started really focusing on it. And I will tell you that when a student comes up to a secretary and says, I don't feel good, I have a tummy ache, we pretty much just say, well, call your parent. But a nurse can go in and call the parent and say, I think you just didn't eat a good breakfast. And the nurse will actually tend to keep the kid in school. So that is a thing that they practice. And it could, like Trustee Turner said, I think it's a very good return on our investment.
I think it can also be helpful for parents to not have kids brought home from school in the middle of the day when they don't really need to be. And for teachers to not be trying to diagnose what's going on, but to know that a nurse is there to take care of them. One of the things that I learned is, we have kids who have seizures in school, and we have kids who have diabetes, and they aren't things where they actually need to be in a hospital or, an ambulance take them away. They're things that actually can be managed, for half an hour or maybe an hour in school, and then can be back in class again. And so, not only could it end up paying for itself with the attendance, but I think, as we're looking at student achievement, and, there's one thing we learned this year, kids are better off being in school. So.
And then there's the added factor overall, board members, that COVID is still here and we don't know that it's going anywhere. And there could be a variant spike in the fall, who knows? And just having that, we have learned over the past, 13 to 14 months that the world changed, and there's really nothing more important now than, and then there are discussions of masking up again every year to possibly during flu season and other things. So there are discussions in the world that maybe, some of our precautions that we did this year for COVID should be done. Like, why did flu numbers drop so dramatically this year across the world? Well, because people were doing things to prevent catching viruses. So I really just think that our world has changed, and having nurses in the school is a very good idea.
Okay, so do I hear a motion?
I would like to make a motion to approve 4 full-time FTE nurses for the next school year. How's that?
Second.
Moved and seconded that we have 4 FTE nurses for next year. Is there any further discussion? Then all those in favor of the motion to approve 4 FTE of nurses signify by saying aye.
We need a second, I think.
Oh, sorry. Do I have a second? Thank you.
Second.
Now it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the motion to approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. The next item on our agenda, well, actually, we're still kind of on the same item here. So the next thing to discuss is the contract hours for a data coordinator. Superintendent Peters, can you talk to us about that?
Yes, this is a request from Angie Martinez and myself. And basically at the end of the year, we are overwhelmed on an annual basis with so much data from all of our test scores and our testing. And then you have to print all that data off, run reports on all that data. We have to send much of that data home as is required by the State Department of Education. And then we also have numbers of reports to finish out that have to go to the state. So in our transformation this year and with our loss of Marcia Grabo when she retired, regrettably back in January, we lost a lot of expertise in that regard. So we've been running kind of on a very thin thread for a long time in terms of reporting to principals, getting help with testing. And our people at the schools and Angie have really picked up the ball where when Marcia left. And so what we're asking for is for Marcia to come back. She is cleared now in terms of her being able to come back for a portion of time to contract with us, and we would like to have her contract with us to come in and possibly, just help us with a vast amount of work that has to be done before we close out the fiscal year. So there's appeals that have to be done. There's working on the assessment calendar for next year. We have to look at Icesat participation appeals, which is a big thing. If there have been students that have been unavailable to take certain portions of the Icesat, and if we drop below a certain percentage, we have to make a formal appeal to the state, and those take quite a bit of time. And this all will be taken care of with our new assistant superintendent next year, who is already doing much of this work at his current school district. But in terms of right now, with all the transitions that we're going through, we really could use some help. So we're asking for some budgeted expenses for allowing us to bring Marcia back in for a short period of time to work with us to help us close out the school year and make sure that we start off the 21-22 school year and have that assessment calendar ready to go, and make sure that all of our reports are uploaded properly to the state and through mileposts and through Skyward, and that we are ready to go for next year, so we don't hand off the new superintendent any kind of reports that were not done properly, or just because right now with all the hiring we have going on and everything else, we just actually are really asking for a little bit of help. And the price would be around a little bit, right around $5,000 at the most.
Are there any questions for Superintendent Peters? Trustee Turner?
Well, we certainly appreciate all the extra workload that the different staff has taken on while we're kind of in this transition period in the district office. And we've heard from principals where a lot of things that flows down to the building level when we don't have the coverage in the district office and so forth. So we truly appreciate all the workload that everyone has borne during this period. My question is more in kind of contextual form. When we bring in somebody on a contract like this, what's the procedure? I mean, what is it? A need is identified by somebody, and then how does it get vetted? And what's the kind of our policy and procedure when we do bring in somebody on a contract like this?
Your mic's off.
It's very similar. I apologize. It's very similar, Trustee Turner, like when Brian Fletcher actually resigned from our district, but then we kept having him come back in and show up for board meetings, meet with various teams, doing some transition work with Cheryl Sanderson as she was taking over, and doing all the work that Brian did. So we set up a basic agreement with Brian Fletcher that we would pay him a certain fund, which was a fair and good wage, that he would come in and do all this extra help during that transition period. And it would be almost have been impossible to not have Brian's expertise, as you folks well know, because you relied so much on him at various meetings to report out and give those detailed reports. So now that Cheryl is all set in her way and she's starting to really get grips on our huge budget here with Blaine County, we can move on, and we don't need Brian's support as much. And we've moved on, and now Cheryl has taken over that role completely. So this is kind of the same type of thing, but just in an inverted little way, because the real spike in the work of this person was always at the end of the year. I can tell you that for years, the last 2 months, like late May and all the way into June, and even up to early July, Marcia was extremely busy because that was her go time. So, right now it's hiring season at HR. And this was always go time for the data assessment coordinator. And so that's why we're kind of doing the same thing that we did with Brian.
And this sort of arrangement is vetted through HR. They kind of look at the parameters of the hours and the pay and sign off on it before it comes to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Like initially we had an agreement with Brian, and we had to adjust some things because HR was like, nope, you got to do it this way, this way, this way. So we go through the proper channels to make sure that our agreement with that person is properly signed off on, and there's a limit to it, so it doesn't extend past a certain amount of money.
Thank you.
Any more questions? I have one. I believe we can use ESSER funds to pay for this. I just wondered, I see Cheryl's on here. Maybe she could answer that.
Yes, thank you. Yes, trustees. This is something I think that would qualify, that we can use the ESSER 2 money for as part of, tracking and keeping schools open and tracking data. I think if Superintendent Peters is comfortable with that, but certainly.
And I believe we also have some FEMA funds that we could use as well. They're both a big part of both of those funds. There is one line item in those funds that says you can do it for the normal operations and keeping the schools open and continuing your normal operations. So I think we could use either one of those funds.
Okay, that's a good way to use one-time funds for a one-time expense.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, do I hear a motion to approve I don't remember how it's framed on here. To approve the contract hours for Marcia Graybo?
So moved.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the contract hours for Marcia Graybo. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, the ayes have it, and the motion carries. The next item on our agenda is the superintendent report. Superintendent Peters?
Thank you, Trustee Stone. And we're moving right along here, aren't we? I'm getting my watch. This is surprising. No, hey, so basically I just want to update you guys on a few things that are happening. We, with the hiring of Tony Bausch at Silver Creek, that creates a little bit of a domino effect. Now we have an opening in Haley. These are high level hirings, and I want to express to the entire community and anyone watching, as well as to all of you, that this is unprecedented. In talking to other superintendents, in talking to anyone in the district that has some administrative experience, all the way back to Phil Homer and Jim Lewis, this is unprecedented in terms of a district having this vast of a turnover in leadership. So literally all our secondary schools will have someone new as the principal. Many of our vice principals will be new. We will have we'll have a new technology director, new transportation supervisor, new finance person, new assistant superintendent, new superintendent. It is literally an incredible transformation. And so while we have lost so many people and retirements have come and people have moved, and that is a bittersweet thing, we have to look at it from a standpoint of some optimism and some potential promise. And I would say that so far, our biggest nervousness about this whole thing is housing. I cannot express enough to everyone that is listening tonight that this is such a major issue. And I expressed that concern with many of our community partner meetings and our recovery meetings that, we are feeling the pinch. We have lost some very high level candidates at our certified teaching level that have accepted and then turned down a position. So that is very frustrating for us. It is an ongoing problem throughout the entire community. But so far, we've landed our administrators. We are looking, and the only thing that is saving us, and so everyone out there that's watching this board meeting, perk up. The thing that is saving us is that people are helping us from a standpoint of letting us know that an offering is coming up because maybe they have a connection to the schools or they want to help our school district. And it has saved us in many regards from someone being able to get a place or not. So some of our best hires this year, including our superintendent, assistant superintendent, they had to work with some extremely good networking and some great realtors that have really assisted us in landing those people a home. And so it is a huge problem moving forward. It is a huge issue for the entire community in every single area of business and civil service. So we keep marching along, and we have a long way to go. We have some very big hires. The high school principal is a huge hire that's coming up very shortly. We're forming the team now to be on that committee. We'll start screening with one team, and then we form the hiring committee as well. Jim Foudy, Mr. Foudy, our new superintendent, and Brooke Marshall will be running that committee. And we have a student on the committee who is accepted, and she is a junior. And I can tell you that she is an incredibly amazing young candidate to be on that committee, and she's super excited about that opportunity. She'll be representing our juniors as well as our Latinx population, and we're excited to have her on board with some other very high quality people on the committee. And then, of course, our technology department director will be a huge hire, as our transportation director will be a huge hire. So this is what's on my mind. I just want you to know, this is Brooke and I, we live, breathe, and eat all this stuff now because it is our ongoing thing. Right in the middle of a very big class and comp study, a classification and compensation study. I got interviewed today, as well as a number of other people were interviewed today, and there's a lot of interviews going on. I know some of you have already been interviewed or will be interviewed tomorrow. So with all that stuff put forward, we really want to move forward with making sure that our employees have equity, making sure that people's job descriptions match their tasks and what they actually do. And it is a very professionally done. We are super excited about it. Some people are worried about it, and there's been some consternation about why we're doing this. No one's going to lose any pay from this, but we can start building salary schedules that actually make sense and salary schedules that are fair. So currently, here's an example. We are trying to hire people from the outside to come in and help our students work in what are called CTE or our academies. So let's look at the Residential Construction Academy. When we're trying to hire someone for the Residential Construction Academy, our language limits that person being placed on the salary schedule. So this is an opportunity to discuss in our meeting to the next 2 nights. So how do we compensate someone? Like, do I want to hire someone that's straight out of college with a teaching degree to build a house, or do I want to hire a contractor who has 20 years of experience building a house? So these are the type of trouble and problems that we're having with some of our classifications and our compensation packages. So this is the work of that class and comp to really help us do our hiring and treat our employees equally and fairly. So that's another huge process that's going on that's just taking up a lot of the HR's time, but they're doing it because they know in the end the return on investment is going to be massive, and it's going to help us move forward and become a more stable and professional district overall. A couple of other things, our COVID numbers in the schools are somewhat stable right now, but the community members and medical professionals are definitely still warning that we are not out of the woods for COVID. We still have to be very cautious. It's getting better, but we're not out of the woods. The city of Haley today just announced a change in their protocols for outdoors. They are trying to work with increasing the numbers of people and not having to wear masks outdoors. So the city of Haley just sent that out, and if you can go to the city site, you can read about their change. So as the communities start changing that, we might be looking at some of those changes as well. We'll be bringing you information about that. If we look at something like when kids are outdoors, they can get some relief as well. Because there is a lot of science now and medical evidence that when they're outdoors, there's just not the same. The indoors is the problem. A small restaurant, a small classroom, things like that, that's where you still have to really be careful with that. But then I can say unequivocally that throughout the entire school year, the evidence of any kind of real school spread is still incredibly minimal to almost nothing throughout this entire year. That is true internationally as well as nationally. And then we're right in the midst of negotiations. We're heading into our final 2 or possibly 3 days. And just wanted to report that we did get a lot of information from the state yesterday. Cheryl and I both attended, me virtually and her in person, the state report. And I will tell you one thing about the state report. There's still a lot of unanswered questions. We do have some information that helps us, but there is a massive, massive new requirement that will be put on the back of HR, which is that now every single teacher, we have to provide actual transcripts instead of just reporting it. So let's say that we hire a teacher from another neighboring Idaho district or something. When they come in, their years of experience and their level of education and those kind of things are set up for that employee. So every single one of our certified employees is set up with the number of years of experience, and we call those employee verifications. And then they're also set up with the level of education they have, a master's +9, a BA +5, whatever it may be. Now we have to actually upload every single transcript from those teachers to the State Department. It is causing a huge uproar throughout the entire education community. The State Department talked about it in kind of an apologetic way, I would say, but it is a big deal. So it is a huge task that is coming towards HR, and it's all due in November. So it's going to, the start of school is another massive, big HR period of time, getting all the new employees trained, getting all the new employees on board. And they have their specific orientation dates that they have to schedule for all the new employees. And it's not just teachers, it's bus drivers and every single new employee. So HR is going to be inundated again with this massive new thing. And it can't just be HR, other departments and even the schools are going to have to contribute. So we're trying to find out some ways to do this, but it's going to be ongoing. So it's not just this one-time thing. This will be our baseline, but then as we move through it every single year, we're going to have to be uploading more and more transcripts. And if you think of HR in the next few years in our district, they're going to be dealing with very heavy levels of retirements. We're averaging about 20 some now, but that could increase as our teaching population is very heavy in those high levels of experience and high levels of education. So our retirement numbers in the next few years could be very heavy as well. And that'll mean a lot more new hiring. So there's a lot coming our way. So the meeting on Monday was not a happy one for most superintendents or school districts. It was, there's still a lot of questions to be answered. And until the final end of the session, which may not be for some time, we'll see if the governor signs the bills on Wednesday. And then if the governor does sign those bills, then the legislature might go ahead and recede for a while, but they may not close out because they may be coming back in the fall. So there's still a lot of things up in the air at the legislative level as well. And if Cheryl wants to jump in, if you have any questions for her on that matter, you should definitely jump on that if you'd like to. If Cheryl wants to add anything.
Cheryl, do you have anything to add to that?
I wouldn't even know. I think it's going to take a bit for us to really understand the impact. They, went through what has been submitted by JFAC, what was adjusted, but we're still down quite a bit over the 1920 year. They really have not restored us to prior COVID year or the 5% holdback. So maybe I think it would be beneficial if we scheduled maybe a budget workshop or something to really review them in more detail. I can share the slides from but it was an entire day going over the new rules, as well as the most important, of course, was the school finance to us. And there are some caveats that have never been in place before that will leave our budget still a little bit unknown as we even get started into next year. So I'm just starting to work on drafts of what that's going to look like. And I don't know if there's a time that we can set where I can actually give more detail and not hold you in the meeting. But overall, at least we think the governor is going to sign it this week, so we can move forward. I'm not sure to what detail we'll have for our meetings going forward in negotiations, but we'll certainly share as much information as we can so that hopefully we can move it forward. I think that the biggest issue is probably moving from the enrollment back to average daily attendance and really understanding what we're going to look at like going into the fall, because we're not sure which students will come back completely. But so we'll have to kind of work with administration and the schools and try to estimate that as best we can. Be conservative and reasonable. There's certain areas that they're not going to fund at all. The gifted and talented is one program that they did not restore. So we have specific areas like that we need to look at closely. And I'll try to get those estimates done and summarized so that we can share it with the whole group. If you have specific questions.
When do you think you would be ready to have a meeting? How far out from now? Like, does it make sense to just talk about it at our June regular meeting, or would you want to do it before that?
Well, right now we have the regular meetings on the 8th, and then we're planning, I believe, to have our budget hearing on the 22nd. Yes. So I think that, if we could even do a work session for a bit before the regular meeting. I don't know if you guys have done that as a rule, but maybe do it right before the at 5:30 or something prior to the regular meeting on the 8th. I think that would be fine, because then we can make adjustments in time to get it published. We'll have to publish. I'm looking at the calendar. We need to publish it once. We'll have it posted for 10 days. So we'll need to post it probably by that Friday, the 11th. So I think that would probably give us time. If you want to add that to your agenda for June.
May 30th was what you said, right? Have a workshop on May 30th.
No, I was talking about having it prior to the regular board meeting on the 8th, the same day.
Oh, same day. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It might be helpful if the board is willing to have a special meeting that's strictly a work session to discuss the budget ahead of time, just because it may be a lot to absorb in one meeting. I mean, that's really up to you guys.
Any input from other trustees?
I think we should schedule a meeting just devoted to that. It's going to take a long time, and it just makes more sense, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. And would you want to do it May 30th, or is there, I don't have a calendar up in front of me here.
So May 30th is actually the Sunday of Memorial Weekend.
Yeah.
I think maybe having it the week of the 24th, that would give, a full week, a week and a half basically to come up with some drafts on the Tuesday, the 25th, or.
Is that a time that works for the rest of you?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that will work.
Okay, great. Let's plan on Tuesday, the 25th then at 6 o'clock. For a workshop or work session. Okay, are there any further questions about any of the stuff that Superintendent Peters brought up, or for Cheryl? Trustee Turner?
Actually, you didn't bring this up, but it's something I've been thinking about. I know we had a number of kids enroll in the IDLA at the beginning of the year, and I'm sure we've been keeping in contact with those families, and just wondered, at some point will we get a progress report as to how they fared, and then again, how does their testing dovetail into our data set? It's just curious to know how those pieces fit together.
Yeah, we did have quite a few kids initially start out with IDLA. Many of those kids did return at various times during the school year. So I don't have that data in front of me, but I could get it pretty quickly for the K through 6. And then the secondary students that were in high school mostly tend to stay with their courses, and we can look at failure rates and passing rates. And then the other thing is that the ISAT is the ISAT is the ISAT. So if they take it through IDLA, if they take it through us, a good study would be to look at ISATs done by students that were full IDLA, or let's say subject specific to IDLA, but then you need someone like Marcia this spring to actually do that kind of work to comparatively. And I could actually see if I can sneak in that ask to Marcia to do that comparison, Trustee Turner. I think that actually would be very interesting data for the district to look at. So let's just take like an average elementary kid. If they stayed as a full-time IDLA student for the year, compare their ISAT growth to a student who was in our school district for partial, who was not in full-time. And I think that data would be very enlightening, and the number I think would be very small. So we have to be cautious with that. And then we'd have to throw out any variables of, let's say, if they were on an IEP or something like that, because many of our students were on an IEP that happened to go towards IDLA, but they also had some IEP services. So we can definitely try to look at that, and I'll ask Marcia if she can sneak that data set in, but her hours are pretty tight in terms of what she has to do, but I can always ask. So.
Okay, I mean, if say she's only worked 56 and a half hours of the 58. Appreciate it.
I think it would be more than an hour and a half. I think it might be a little bit more than that to come up with that data. But we really could break that down, because the IDLA students that worked with us were considered Blaine County students.
Right.
And as we move out of the COVID era, hopefully, it is a consideration that we have to consider online options for kids and continually be focused on what our district can do, because it's the wave of the future. I think it was about 12 years ago when I started to see online education really start to grow that I questioned, and I brought this up to my staff, is will we have brick and mortar schools by 2025, 2030? I think yes is the answer, because that acculturation and that kids being with kids is so critical. But I think we're going to have to start learning that in business, and this is going to be a business, if we're going to be competing with businesses, that we're going to have some online options so students can attend on a partial basis. Choice is something that people love, and if we're a one-size-fits-all, everyone has to fit in this box, I think we're going to suffer in the next decade unless education can move forward and start offering some multi-platform options for students to attend at various points in the day and various times in the year. Like right now, Idaho is really talking about students that want to challenge a course. Why should a student have to sit in a classroom if they already know the material? So you'll see that there's going to be more and more options out of the state of Idaho with funds to pay for students to challenge a course, to take AP tests, to take a SAT test and things like that. And even our state is challenging the notion of that you have to sit in there for 4 years in this chair, this many hours to get a degree. Now you can get your high school diploma in a much shorter period of time and not even have to be present. You can be doing it virtually. So there's so many more options for people. And I think districts are going to have to compete in the future.
Any more questions? Okay, Superintendent Peters, is that the end of your report? Okay, I'm only the acting chair, so I'm just going to have a brief update because I'm on the negotiations committee. I just want to note that I have appreciated the opportunity to work with the BCEA in negotiations. As Superintendent Peters said, we're 3 days in at this point, and I just wanted to touch on a couple things. We have discussed the need to get the policy, finance, and calendar committees back up and running. COVID has been overwhelming for everyone, but with a calendar review coming up and a possible levy in March, it'll be helpful to have these committees in place sooner than later. So that's one of the things we've talked about. We've also discussed the impact that professional learning communities have on student achievement. We've asked the BCEA to provide the board with data and studies about PLCs and how schedule changes might better support PLC work. It's an ongoing discussion that's going to require a lot of input from major stakeholders and thoughtful planning before we make any decisions, but we are actively seeking information from them about more information about PLCs. And there was also a mutual recognition that the regular meetings held by the BCEA with the superintendent and admin throughout the year can be used to address issues as they come up. And we think that this will really allow more time to thoughtfully address these issues together and hopefully simplify negotiations going forward. So those are some kind of positive things that we've worked through with negotiations. That's all I have from that standpoint. Our last item is on the information agenda is the threat assessment and planning program information. Superintendent Peters, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it looks like Morgan's being brought up, so I'd like to introduce the topic for us here. Basically what this is a few years ago, I was able to attend a FBI training in Boise to really beef up our threat assessment protocols throughout the district. And what a threat assessment protocol is it is basically the work of a team. Research from all these shootings across the country, and when mass shooting events happen, there's a thing called a debrief. And when they get back together and everyone starts talking about what happened, why did this happen at this school on this day with this individual or these people? One of the things that keeps coming up is that a lot of people knew a lot of things, but a lot of people that knew a lot of things weren't necessarily talking. So you have a teacher that knew that the student was maybe writing threatening letters or writing in their journal in a threatening way. You had a parent that was scared that their child was starting to go down a wrong path and was showing signs of maybe being somewhat dangerous and was changing, and when they were worried. You had a school psychologist that maybe, or a outside the agency psychologist that maybe knew something about a student. You had a kid or a student who knew something. You had a school principal that maybe had heard something or seen a change in the student's attitude. The problem is that none of those people may be talking. So threat assessments are about building an effective team that reacts instantaneously and quickly to any possible threat. And the first thing they do is they determine the level of that threat. So one of the wonderful things that has happened in the past couple of years in this district is we built a very well-defined and very thorough threat assessment plan for a student. Here's our problem. Our threat assessment is a massive binder that once it's completed, it goes to the district office and it kind of hangs out there and collects dust. And then it's very difficult for us to then once again have that data at our fingertips, then once again to know exactly who was involved in that threat assessment, to bring up an incident that might have happened a couple of years ago. Many people have moved on. The same people that know about that incident might be gone. So what we're looking at is Morgan is and I want to say Ballas, right? Not Bayless, because I think I mispronounced it the other day. But Morgan, I've gotten to know Morgan through his work here in the community, and I've seen him on the news. I've seen him with many of his trainings. He is a trainer of many school districts across the country in terms of school safety and security, and he also presents at many conferences. He helps develop conferences. He is an ex-Marine, and he's been very, very involved in school safety and just personal safety. So I've saw him on one of our local Idaho stations recently. And my concern as a superintendent is that the threat assessment has been proven to be one of the most important things you can have as a district. So we have a program right now, but Morgan introduced me to a program that is a digital program and would be much more user-friendly. So I'm going to pass it over to Morgan to talk about his plan. And we just are looking for some assistance from the board in terms of your approval to move forward. And this would be a really low-cost item for the board as well if everything goes well. So if I may, I ask your permission to hand it over to Morgan so he can talk about his plan with his nonprofit called Academy Grove.
Welcome, Morgan. I think your mic's off.
How's that? Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's good. Now I can hear.
Superintendent Fritz, trustees, thank you so much for this opportunity. Last year, right before COVID hit, my wife, Desi, who's actually the literacy coach at Hemingway, we started a nonprofit called Academy Grove. And the purpose of Academy Grove was to support K-12 schools, first in identifying evidence-based safety programs. One of the challenges that we face for schools across the United States is a lot of knee-jerk reactions to incidents that happen. And unfortunately, the result are programs or protocols or security features that really aren't aligned to best practices, aren't supported by emergent research, and really aren't data-driven. So as a nonprofit, one of our missions is to support K-12 schools in identifying those. And of course, as all of you know, identifying things is great, but actually funding things can be a challenge. So our second mission is to actually support schools in fully funding some of the programs that we help them identify. I had the opportunity, really, I think around December, Fritz and I connected, and he started to tell me about the threat assessment teams that were in place. And I was super excited to hear this as a new family in the district, that we were already being proactive in this area. And what we did is we sat down and we talked to a number of threat assessment team members across the district, school psychologists, school resource officers, social workers, some of our administrators, key components of the threat assessment teams. And we asked them what some of their challenges were. And overwhelmingly, the challenge was that the program was there, the program was viable, but there really wasn't a system that allowed them to collaborate. There wasn't the ability for them to transfer students from school to school. And that is something that we thought that we'd be able to help with. One of our mission partners with our nonprofit, is PMAM, and they have a program called the Threat Assessment and Planning Program. And essentially what it is it is a software-based system that allows threat assessment teams to be able to communicate, collaborate, identify at-risk students, to identify the best intervention strategies to support those students, and then to deliver that support as necessary. And a lot of times when we think about threat assessments, we think about, a student posting a picture of a firearm, or maybe in the midst of carrying out an attack, but really it's so much more than that. This program gives our educators and our community the tool to be able to identify students long before they get into crisis and deliver them support, whether it's self-harm or harming others, to be able to help them find solutions before they reach that point of crisis. And so that's what we want to do. We want to be able to deliver this TAP program to the district. What we found through our discussions is that our educators in our schools, they have a lot on their plates right now. So when Fritz approached the administrators and some of the threat assessment teams, they just weren't ready for it at this moment. But we did have 3 sites, the Wood River High School, Wood River Middle School, and Ernest Hemingway, who said that they would be excited to take on this program. So what we would like to do as Academy Grove is we would like to purchase the TAP program for these 3 sites for the next 3 years. We're not asking any matching funds from the board. We're not asking for any funds from the district. We will raise the funds necessary to deliver this program to our sites. And we fully anticipate to be able to achieve our goal by the end of June.
Superintendent Peters.
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. And we've presented this already to the PTA, and I do have a couple of letters already from the PTA that have supported it. One from the Wood River Middle School PTA, and they have already voted to donate and buy one of the first puzzle pieces. So it's the idea of you have 100 puzzle pieces and you actually are putting together a picture. And so there's 100 puzzle pieces for $200 each. We'd be raising $20,000. That's more than enough money that we would need for these first 3 years, but it would be the idea that we would have a little bit of a fund going there. So we'd have that fund balance of about $1,500 to $1,900. Heather Doman from the PTA at Haley also signed on. And so we're trying to get some support from the parents. And then we want to launch it as as an initiative throughout the community to try to raise that $20,000 to get this program going. I know that this is an uncomfortable topic, and with what just happened at one of our neighboring school districts in Idaho is an absolute tragedy, and thank God there was no loss of life. But this has been going on now in America in the short term for unprecedented levels, and you can just span over this last weekend and late last week, where you can just see the vast amount of dangerous situations in our communities, as well as in some of them even in our local schools. But this isn't just about this. This isn't just about these huge crises. It's about every threat that we see. So one of the things that happens is with a threat assessment program, the first thing we do is we look at the level of threat. So we have our initial threat assessment piece that determines the level of threat, and it's very scientifically based, and it really gets into the depth of what's been going on, talking to as many people in that person's life. And it's not necessarily a child. It could be a threat from a parent. It could be a threat from a staff member. It could be a threat from one of our students. It could be any threat that comes our way. And we involve everyone: law enforcement, social workers, school psychologists, teachers, parents, like I said. And then when we get that full picture, we can develop that early analysis of what level of threat is this. If it's a low level threat, it was simply a comment said in passing. The student has walked it back. They apologized. It's a very different situation than if there was a plan, if the person was going to harm themselves or others, and if the threat is a much higher threat. If it's a mid-level or high-level threat, then the entire threat assessment protocols are used. And our again, as Morgan stated, our problem is that it's a redundant type of paper thing that once it's completed, it tends to go away. And it's so hard to access that information again without having to come and get the threat assessment binder and bring it back in and then redo it. So this program actually gives you updates. It allows you to make sure that you can get material and information and inquiries from multiple people in a very seamless way. So we're kind of excited about it. And we're really just asking that the board step forward if they are willing to and say, yes, we support this endeavor. And then Morgan and I will take off and do the best we can to get this funding going and reach out to our community and try to get this funding. And if any of you want to buy a puzzle piece too, you can surely buy a puzzle piece. Amber, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. Is it something that you guys considered of making this maybe district-wide? I understand that, people are busy, but I feel like this is a very important matter right now that all of our students, on top of COVID that they've experienced, are going through. And I think that this is a really great opportunity to be able to reach our students and find the time to maybe make this district wide. And especially with a lot of, all the change that we have going as administrators in each school, something new, something new, that if it's implemented as we all begin and we can move through this together.
I want to stress that we still do have our threat assessment program. We still can use our threat assessment program at every single school. There was a little hesitancy on some schools to jump on board, but what we want to do is we want to spend the first part of this first year once we raise the money and once we're able to get the purchase going, and once we get the training done by Archit, who is our representative from PMAM. And once we get that going in the school sites, those first 3 schools, then it's kind of like a beta test. And we're kind of doing a test to make sure that we like it. We can ask questions. We can work out a lot of the kinks. And then our hope, and I know Morgan's on board with this, and I'm going to say I know he is, because then we would want to try to branch it out to every single school. But then we'd work out a lot of that kinks, and we'd have that really core team work on that initially. And in a sense, this kind of makes sense to where we have that commitment with these 3 sites first. And I would say even by as soon as mid-year to earlier, we would want to start possibly passing that on to the entire district. And then we can actually set up teams and have our new superintendent and assistant superintendent set up those safety meetings where people like Morgan and Archit can come in, and we can start really looking at training some of the other schools and getting them ready to move on board with the whole program. So it is our intent long-term to get this involved in every single school. And Morgan is really committed to not just doing this for Blaine County, but trying to move this into many, many school districts across Idaho to keep every kid in Idaho safe as possible and every adult safe as possible in our schools and as well as in our communities.
Trustee Lorna, just to also address your question, we're purchasing the program for 3 years for 3 sites. So let's say next year we have the other schools that want to jump on it. We could easily shave off a year on the back end of those 3 sites and then deliver it essentially to 3 more schools or vice versa. We're also raising essentially 25% above what we actually need. And the reason we do that is because for us, equity is extremely important. And we want to make sure that if other schools decide that they want this, that there's not a delay, that we can deliver it right away. I was extremely excited that the high school, middle school, and Hemingway were the ones that jumped on this, because the data supports that high school and junior highs definitely need these programs more than elementaries. I would fully expect Cary to jump on. I think they would be the other school within our district, which I think is extremely important based off of the grades that they support with their students. And so we have the ability to immediately turn around and say, hey, we're going to do this for Cary for the next 3 years as well. But we have flexibility. Archit and the team at PMA and their mission partners with us. So we only work with companies that we fully vet and that allow us the flexibility that they normally wouldn't allow other organizations. So that way we can pivot based off of the response that we get from other administrators, other parents, or students within those sites that feel like this would be an asset for them.
Great, thank you.
Trustee Turner.
Sounds like excellent work. Who could, not be behind something that's going to make our kids safer? I had a few questions though. If I'm understanding this right, this sounds like a digitization of processes that we have in place. We're basically taking it out of this notebook format and putting it into a place where we can access it digitally. And is that kind of where this is going?
Yes, that's exactly what this program is.
Okay, and then so PMAM, they're a partner. Do they have a track record? Have they been doing this other places, or is this what kind of domain expertise have they demonstrated to date on this?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Trustee Turner. They're working with school districts. They're based out of Texas, is where they're based out of Dallas, Texas. They're working with districts across the United States, from as small as just a couple sites to the largest district has 27 schools. It's a K-12 district. Their original company works with law enforcement across the United States in their annual requirements for training and data. So all of those things, the questions that I'm sure you're going to ask and that you should be asking regarding protections of students' privacy, who owns this data, all those questions have been worked with through Fritz and other individuals, the IT department here within the districts. They have 100% the record and the capability to make sure that we are storing this data. First of all, the data is ours as a district. We have access to it. They have full protections on their ends. They've been doing this for over 2 decades, working within this realm of digitizing software and training. And their primary audience has been working with law enforcement agencies across the United States. They also use this program for a number of foster cares across the United States as well, who have taken this on to support their populations as well.
And then one last follow-up there. How would this be supported within the district? I know there'll be a certain amount of interface that has to go on from our side, and I'm just wondering about the the costs inside of our personnel to support this. And then I know when we're looking at those lists of software that we support, Gaggle is one that we look at, where that's monitoring the internet traffic and so forth. And how does that interface with what we're doing? So again, what is the requirements within the district to support this model, and two, how does it interact with stuff that we're already doing?
Another great question. As of right now, it's extremely flexible. It's up to the district how they want to implement it. Other districts, what they've done is essentially they can push down, there's different levels of users. So at the base level might be an educator who can submit a report. And at the top level would be the threat assessment team who has full access to all data regarding all students. So it really depends on how the district wants to roll it out. I know that these were questions among the threat assessment teams that we were having internally and what this might actually look like. Fritz can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think initially what we're looking at is not adding an extra burden on the educators or the staff themselves. And it would be the threat assessment teams who initially have access and the ability to use this system until we determine at what level we want to roll that out to the rest of the staff members. In terms of interfacing with other software, that would be a question we'd have to ask to Archit and his team. As of right now, the burden is very minimal on the school. We upload our current threat assessment packet into the system. We upload our students, which is done via an Excel spreadsheet. And then essentially we're just ready to use the system as we feel necessary.
Thank you.
Is this a cloud-based setup or a server-based one? Where's the data stored?
Trustee Stone, that's a great question. It's stored on their servers. So that's part of that cost that happens annually. But their servers, like I said, they're working with law enforcement agencies across the US for the past 2 decades. So all those security measures are in place, but the data is stored with them. And that's kind of where some of that cost is coming in as well, is just the upkeep and just storing that data, especially as the district grows over numerous years, because that data is stored indefinitely until we as a district decide that you no longer want that data. And that's another great thing about this program, is it gives us access to more information to determine in which ways we can best support our community. Based off of the demographic information that we decide to incorporate, if we want to, we may see that certain populations, maybe from a socioeconomic standpoint, are facing challenges, and the stressors that they're facing and the way that they are communicating that stress, although on the surface might seem like a threat, there's just much deeper underlying issues, and we might be able to network with different partners within the community to support not just those students, but those families as well. So this is the power of data, as all of you know. This is something that for me and our family who have been impacted by a mass murder incident directly, we're extremely passionate about, because we realize that as we gather more data, there's just greater chances for intervention and prevention. And that's really the end goal.
And so access is through a browser then?
Yes, I apologize. I didn't answer that directly. It is a browser-based system. So that's how it would be accessed, yes.
Okay. And then I think you mentioned this, but this obviously would be a lot of really sensitive information, and privacy for our students would be really critical. So I'm assuming there's, levels of access that people have based on their roles, and there's a process in place to continually evaluate that as people leave or come in to protect the privacy of the students.
Yes, privacy is huge as the parent of students. This is huge for me. So everything is aligned to FERPA. Everything is, we're ensuring that the privacy of those students is being protected, and then also who has access as well. What's great about this system is it's flexible. You can decide who can see what at what time based off of their relationship to their student or their role within the district. So that's something that would be set at the essentially by the threat assessment teams within the superintendent's office, who's going to have access and who's going to participate as well. Another thing that's great about protecting student privacies is it helps us eliminate our own unconscious bias. If I immediately see, for example, that a student has a threat assessment, I might interact with that student differently. And we don't want that to happen in the name of equity and making sure that we're supporting students the way that they need to be supported. So there's a lot of great layers in place. There's a lot of flexibility based off of the needs and how we want to use this as the district. And that's one of the reasons that our nonprofit has partnered with PMAM, because there is truly, and I'm telling you this because I've worked in this industry for nearly a decade now, there is no other system or program that delivers what this program delivers, and also the level of protection that it delivers as well.
Superintendent Peters, has our IT department had an opportunity to, I don't know, see the white paper on it from a security standpoint and also consider it from a user perspective?
Yeah, that would be one of the next steps if we start moving forward, is to really work closer with Teresa. She does know about it and she's been updated on it, but work closer with Teresa and other members of the group to ensure that kind of comportability of the program would be able to work through the transition of the director of technology, as well as that they feel comfortable with everything involved in there. So in terms of any kind of MOU that we would finally sign with both groups, the nonprofit as well as being a partner with PMAM, all that stuff would be vetted very closely through the finance department as well as through the technical department. And by the way, Morgan, you probably want to use that 25% up, because I already got a text from Carrie people that they want it too. So
I love it. That's awesome. By the way, since Thursday, this was rolled out to the PTAs as Thursday. Community based is just huge for us. We've already sold 10 puzzle pieces, so we're already 10% there. So I think we're going to crush this goal, and we hope that you're willing to support us and back this with us, so that way we can deliver this asset to our schools.
I have one further question. If, let's say we decide to do it, we do it for the 3 years, and then we decide there's a lot cheaper option that would work just as well, and we want to switch. You said we own the data, which to me means that we could then download this data, export it out of the system and pull it into another system somewhere in theory. Is that how it works? Like, do we have access to our data, and can we, if we commit to this, are we committing for a really long time, or do we have some options down the road?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's something we would have to explore with the IT department and Archit more specifically. My initial, I'm not with PMAM, so they're just our mission partners. So my initial response would be 100%. It's our data, so therefore we can get it. What that actually looks like, I don't know. And I agree with you as well. It's when you start to get into using software, especially at this level, it reaches a time where it's almost like you feel like you can't go backwards. I'll tell you now, as a family that's in the community, as an educator my wife is an educator at one of the schools, our kids in the district, we're not going anywhere. So if for some reason in 2 years, we need to pivot and we need to find something that better fits our district, I promise you, we will still be here to be able to support that. But that's something that I can reach out to Archit directly and get an answer for you on, is if we decide to part ways, how do we get that data, and what does that actually look like?
It'll be such important information to be collecting, and it'll be really valuable, I think, to us from a safety perspective for a long time going forward. So I'd want to make sure that we retain some control over that and understand, and the IT department can evaluate that obviously better than anybody else. But if you can make sure that's part of what they evaluate, that would be great. Trustee Larna.
Trustee Turner had his hands up first, but I would like to when he's done.
Oh, thank you. So just in terms of process, what would be the next thing we would see here? A memorandum of understanding between the parties, and then we'd actually sign off on that? And is that kind of how this thing would, the trajectory of the process would go?
Yeah, we already have some papers drawn up that would need to be vetted a little bit more deeply, and we have agreements with both Academy Grove and PMAM, and then we would look at those, and then I'd have Cheryl review them as well as our attorney, and we would just move forward. If we felt comfortable there, then we would wait to meet our funding goal, and then we would start enacting it. And then once that funding goal is even in process, I believe Morgan and I have talked about with Archit that we could then start actually the training process as early as this spring. We could actually start training and getting things downloaded and start working on it, even though we haven't completely met our funding goal, because as mission partners, they have that flexibility to start working with us, knowing that we're well on our way. I mean, already selling the 10% before a wide-based real push out is pretty phenomenal. I was really shocked about that, Morgan, so thank you. That's really good news, because we're well on our way with 10% of our goal already, and it hasn't even really been pushed out to the community yet. So we're excited about that. And so every step of the way, we'd have technology involved, we'd have finance involved, and then our attorney, Jill Halinka, would be involved as well to ensure that we're not signing something that we regret or anything like that, of course. And we routinely have MOUs and things like that reviewed. If they are something different or new, we have them reviewed on that first go round with our attorney.
But then the MOU, after it's crafted, would come back to the board for us to sign off on before we move forward.
Not necessarily, no. We have many MOUs that just have the superintendent's signature and then the signature of the partnering agency. So like we have, I would say, I can't even count how many MOUs we have with, like right now we have, an MOU for services with our summer program, and I sign off on those. So there's so many MOUs, you would have a list like this. And we have an MOU right now that I just renewed with the Haley Police Department. We're in the final process of checking that MOU with the Haley Police Department for the renewal of our SRO program at Wood River Middle School and High School. So we do this quite a bit, and the MOUs go through that same process from start to finish. So as superintendent, I think I've already signed probably close to 15 standardized MOUs that we do in multifaceted situations across the board for all kinds of partnerships, from having people use certain parts of our property to having people trade off this and that. But it's all pretty standard administrative work that we do on a regular basis.
Trustee Larna.
Is there space for a school if they want to join in this, or right now, or like, have we just talked about doing the 3 schools?
If we needed to adjust we put out the call, and those 3 schools came back, I guess now 4 schools. So if we needed to adjust, we could. I think for this initial push, a much better option would be to maybe shave a year off of the back end to deliver to the schools that want it immediately. And then we would look at raising additional funds to be able to withstand that.
Great.
Superintendent Peters, I would just say I would want to be sure that IT obviously reviewed it. We already talked about that. That some of the users, at least a couple users, looked at the interface to make sure it looks like something that they are willing to, whoever kind of your key users are, take a look at that and make sure that that looks usable. With Keith gone, if you would just have a conversation with him too. I think, part of this is if we can't raise the money, then the district, if we're going to keep it going, the district will have to pay for it in the future. And so we're kind of tying hands of future boards. So he might want it to go before the board again. And I feel like he has a little more clarity on that than I do. So if you could run that by him and see if he would prefer to have it before the board. Also, obviously, he's not here today to provide his feedback, so that'd be great.
Yeah, one of the things we did, Trustee Stone, early on was we brought it forward to much of the team members so that they could see the interface and they got to see a presentation so that they were all on board right away. They were like, this would be so much easier. So that's part of the impetus that got this whole ball rolling, was way back, I think in December, January, when we started talking about it. We've been working on this for 3 or 4 months. And we're trying to coalesce into a meeting coming up here to try to get everyone at the table again, just to move forward if you guys are okay with this initial thing. And we don't want to, there's always the question with tech of like, oh, here we go, another program. So there's always that angle to it. And, before we commit to anything and do a final thing, we want to make sure that everyone on board is able to move forward, and that people and tech can do this, the schools can do it. And people have been very, very positive about it from the get-go. So Dave Stellers, our safety and security officer, was involved in one of the initial meetings. He and some of our school psychs and social workers just were right away saying, please get us this program. This is going to be so much easier. It's going to be more helpful. So there was that initial buy-in, and then we expanded that buy-in to a larger group, and they all loved it. I missed one of the big meetings where they presented it more at a high level with many people, and they liked it as well.
That's great. It's only as good as the data that gets put into it. And so having that buy-in is important. I hadn't realized that you'd had so many meetings and already seen that. That's really good to know. Yeah,
and I just want to mention that real quickly here, that Teresa just texted me, and she did say that she, excuse me 1 second. This is what happens at all these meetings. I love the fact that people are watching and they constantly, but she said she did ask the question about our data with PMAM in the case of a termination of contract, and they assured us that they would assist in the export of the data. I would recommend that the details be included in the MOU, and data privacy, and another question that we already had posed to them. So we've been working with some of these folks since the get-go. So we'll definitely, we want to be very above board about this type of program, and really it makes our lives in administration easier, and we can sleep better at night knowing that we have a quicker and more responsive program to really drill down in any kind of threat. So, we just had an issue recently where we did a TA, a threat assessment at the high school, and that one was being dealt with the last 5 days. So it takes quite a while, and they do it very carefully, and immediately those metrics come into play when you look at that threat and you look at what level that threat is. And all of this stuff came out of mostly a big broad-based. I really want to do a shout out to Jamie Delgado, because when I worked with her very closely in developing our initial threat assessment program, she had been through a number of courses and some training, and so had I. So we kind of married that training. And one of the key things to that training was how to do that initial threat assessment in terms of determining the level of threat. Is it a low-level threat? If it's a low-level threat, then we turn it back to the specific school people that will be working through it, and we monitor it. But if it's a mid or high-level threat, immediately the work expands to a much broader base. We do more investigation, we do more study, we do more, turning over every rock possible to see, and this involves even sometimes the Haley PD or local PD going to a house and meeting with the parents and bringing the parents in and doing a security check. So it really is an intense program that really make sure that we are keeping the safety of our students and the student themselves or the adult in mind. So it's a much better process. And the FBI and the School Administrators Association, they all value the threat assessment process as the best way to ensure that you do the best you can to avoid a much bigger problem down the road.
Thank you. Morgan, I just want to thank you so much for being part of our community and bringing your expertise to the board and sharing that with all of us, because this does seem like an excellent opportunity to really step up our system here. Trustee Turner?
Directionally, I couldn't be more in favor of something like this, but all these things keep popping into my head about, the vetting and everyone signing off on it and then it not coming back to the board. This is an unbelievable opportunity, but there are a lot of moving pieces here that I probably can't even anticipate at this point. And would just have a lot more comfort. And I certainly don't mean to slow this process down, but to be able to go back, have it come back to us one more time before we give it the final go. Is that would that be okay?
I think what would be appropriate is, sorry, Morgan, but I think what would be appropriate is if we give you a real update to answer all your questions. With the funding already going forward and the with the fundraising already going forward, I think the key thing would be to keep you guys in the loop along the way. And then if you'd like to review our attorney's notes on the MOU or anything like that, we can provide you with all that information as soon as you request it or whenever we can get it on the docket. That would be more than acceptable if you're okay with that.
That'd be outstanding. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. So nothing further on your part then, Superintendent Peters, right? Okay, great. Thank you, Morgan. Appreciate it.
Thank you. As a parent, as the spouse of an educator, thank you so much for putting our safety and security at the top of your list.
Well, thanks for bringing an idea and the money to pay for it. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is to go into executive session. I think I will read that off and take a motion to move forward with that and then have a recess right before we, just a 10-minute recess before we reconvene. So the next item on the agenda is a proposal to go into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 742061J to consider labor contract matters authorized under section 742061 Idaho Code.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we go into executive session. This requires a roll call vote. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Larna,
Aye.
Trustee Turner,
Aye.
Trustee Gorham,
Aye.
Trustee Stone.
Aye. So, Madam Clerk, if you could note for the record that we are going into recess. It is 7:52 right now. Let's go into recess. How about until 8:05, and then come back into executive session. Nice work. All right, Madam Clerk, please note that it is 9:07 and we're returning from executive session. And I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes with the ayes and the motion carries. Thank you very much for the meeting tonight.
Thank you.
Make sure Chairman Rourke sees what time this meeting ended. It is not 10:07. Thank you, Vice Chairperson.
Winning.
No problem. Bye, guys. Thanks.
Winning.